Everyone, thanks for checking out this demo or beta test of this Andromeda editor I made. If I sent you the website link, you should be seeing this here. And then here you can download the beta and install it. It's a DMG file. I believe it will be Apple Silicon only, unfortunately. But if you're able to get it and download it and open it, this should be the initial screen that you get. You might get a prompt to connect your MIDI connections or sync. So I'll just kind of start this video about how to get you up and running, and then you can kind of go off from there. But I'll keep talking and go through the options if you want to come back later and learn about what different things do. All right, so the first thing you need to do is get your MIDI settings set up. I'm on a computer right now doing this recording, so my system is not hooked up to my Andromeda. So I'm not going to have it here, but you would see your MIDI connections typically and set it up here. So you got your input and output, whatever MIDI connection your A6 is on. And then if you have a controller, a MIDI controller, you can hook that up here as well. I'm going to open up the inputs and outputs and then close that up. And then once the MIDI's set up, you want to do a sync. If it's your first time using this app at all, I would suggest doing a system sync, which will sync all your main banks to the system. It will take 5 or 10 minutes to do that, but once you get that full system sync, you don't need to do that again. You could either sync just, if you're working on a single program, or sync just the bank. The sync with the program takes like maybe 10 seconds. The bank maybe takes a minute. All right, so once you're synced up, you'll get to this screen. And basically, you should be good to go. One of the things that to know is I defaulted this to kind of automatically follow and send instructions back and forth. So once you're synced with your Andromeda, what you do here should match what you see on the Andromeda as well. You can turn that off here, and then, for some reason, if you wanted to edit a bunch of settings here and then send them to the Andromeda once you're set, you can just hit the button here and send that, but typically you're going to want to leave these on so we have, one-to-one relationship as best we can between the Andromeda and the editor. Okay, so generally you've got the main system settings up top, you've got navigation on the bottom, you've got your main page here, and then you've got 2 sidebar tools, and we'll get to those eventually, but here is your main page that you're going to be working on mostly. You've got 6 tabs that you can work with. You can set in the program settings what tab you want the program to open or what tools you want it to open, but this is the default here. We're going to start with the oscillators. You basically have all your tools in different sections under these banners, as you can see. I did not go for skeuomorphic design just because there's so much going on in the Andromeda. I wanted to kind of arrange these things in a more compact way, but also in a way that I think, at least to me, conceptually makes some sense, so you can better understand and learn the Andromeda. So here, you got like a little screen that kind of mimics the square wave screen that's on the Andromeda. You got your semitones. Typically you have a knob, slider, and a value box. You got drop-down menus here that will also change. So this is the oscillators. You've got your filter section here, which includes your pre-filter mix, your 2 filters, and then your post-filter mix. You've got an LFO section where you've got tabs here for each of the 3 LFOs, plus a sample and hold, which the settings are at the bottom. Here, obviously, you've got the different wave type, and you can affect your rate and phase. Now, I did kind of try to mimic these screens to look kind of what it looks like on the Andromeda, but these are not perfect recreations. And so I put these here more as a conceptual rendering of what's going on, just so you can understand, like, okay, if we change this value, this is basically what's going on inside the Andromeda right there. So, and you could set that for each of the LFOs. And then down here in the trigger section, again, the wave you're seeing here on this screen is not actual data. It's, again, a conceptual understanding, because for me, it helps to understand exactly what type of data or triggers might be occurring. So for example, if we're looking at aftertouch, if we got aftertouch levels, might mimic this type of shape. And we have it on a negative trigger and we turn the level up, you can see exactly how many times the trigger might go in that type of waveform. And then you can do positive or bipolar. And if you get the type of input that goes above and below 0, you can use the absolutes. So again, this is here just to kind of understand how the different things might be interacting with in the Andromeda, but this is, again, a conceptual understanding. This isn't actually mimicking anything that's happening on the A6. Likewise, over here in the Performance tab, you've got the clock, keyboard mode, arpeggiator settings, the trigger settings, which again are kind of similar. Again, the same type of conceptual rendering screen. You got your pitch wheel and your portamento here. Just so you know, any of these curve screens, you can click them to cycle through the different types of curves that's selected. One thing to note, one limitation of the Andromeda is that the values that are shown here are approximations. Obviously, if you got a typical, like a semitone or this unison X where there's like a discrete number of values, it's pretty easy to map that one-to-one. But for some of these more complex or weird numbered parameters like the clock speed or the frequency for the filters, it's not 100% match. I have sampled different values one-to-one and taken those and created a mathematical line that approximates the values, but the Andromeda is kind of weird in how it handles some of this. There's no true mathematical line. The only way to get a perfect rendering would literally be to take a pen and paper and go through every value of the 4,095 values and then look at what the number on the Andromeda screen was, write that down, and make a table that we could look up to do this. I've tried my best, but there's just some of these are just going to be approximations. So you'll see that if you want a specific, precise value, make sure you're actually looking at your Andromeda screen. Filter, is next. Like I said, the same thing kind of happens with the filter. A lot of times people just use this based on sound, so you're not going to look and say I need a specific frequency value. But these are approximations on these values. It's close, but it's not perfect. Otherwise, I think this is, if you're familiar with the Andromeda, this should all make sense. You've got mod buttons here. When you first hit the mod button, it opens up the mod screen, and then you can enable it here, and then it'll be enabled here. And then in the envelope screen, you've got all your envelope setting plus the envelope dynamics, and you've got a conceptual envelope and loop playback screen. So I'm going to pull up a different patch here. And again, we're getting some different, got to get some issues on the envelopes here. What you're seeing here, again, this is not perfect. This is a conceptual rendering of what the envelope or the might look like for your sound. And again, you've got envelope 2, envelope 3, and envelope 1. So you can kind of test what this will look like holding down this test button and then letting go, just to kind of see conceptually what that filter shape or envelope shape would look like. Here it's applying to the filter. Over here is a loop side. So if you put it on the loop, you can kind of understand what the loop function is here. I've always had troubles, kind of understanding what's going on there. So this kind of conceptual illustration helps me understand that. And again, we can kind of change the different curves here as needed. So see here. Yeah. There we go. I'm going to make it positive. Yeah, there we go. Okay. And then you can go your trigger and re-trigger settings there. Okay. And then in the effects section here, you've got your voice mix, your output, your analog, distortion settings, and your digital effects settings. I kind of try to put them so you've got different layouts. So as you pick one, the specific layout that would happen in the parameters will pop up here. Over here, I put a routing illustration, again, to help me conceptually understand what's going on. You've got kind of a routing where you can get a single level can come right from your mains, and then you can kind of send some to your analog distortion settings, and that can go to the main, or it could also feed into the digital effects, and then that eventually can also come out. So this kind of helps visualize exactly how much volume is coming out from which different area. So if you're having some things where you're getting some sort of overload or distortion, this might help visualize where you might want to kind of balance your levels at. Same thing here. Here's the kind of routing for the different effects. Again, just a conceptual illustration of like, hey, this is how everything's happening with the effects. So if you're looking at the different values here, you can kind of better understand what's going on there. Okay, so I think we've got most of the main pages done. I want to talk about the navigation. It's pretty straightforward. We've got the buttons on the bottom just like we have on the A6. The bank here, you can kind of go through. And so I have this warning here that pops up by default. Anytime you move off a patch, if you've changed something, just to kind of make sure you don't lose your work that you're doing. But if that gets annoying, you can go up to program settings and turn those off. You shouldn't get those anymore. Now, one thing to note, the memory card I have for my A6 actually, went bad. So I actually have to try that out. So I don't have any code for how to handle card-based processing. So if you want to store any programs, banks, or patches that you're using, on here on one of your card banks, you'll actually have to transfer it to your user bank on your A6 and then copy that bank as a whole to one of your card banks later on. One of the limitations, the mixer and the sequencer, those are still under construction. Before I get the mix settings set up, I want to make sure I got the program settings all locked down before we finish this. The sequencer, there are some issues with how to implement that because the sequencer really relies on the nudge buttons, and there is no way to trigger or understand if those have been triggered through MIDI, unfortunately. So that limits how you can really get a lockdown on the sequencer. But I know you can do some settings on that because I did make that for an Electra 1 preset I did a year or two ago, but we will work on that, but that's a secondary function to getting everything squared away first. We have a increment, decrement, patch navigation here. And then we have this expand button, which just kind of shows you all the different 128 patches in your bank. Here you can change the program name just by typing it out, and if you change it and then exit, it will actually automatically send it over to your A6. It might take 10 seconds to transfer, but it will work. Same thing with the bank. It won't change the user bank file name, but it will change it in the file data that we have. Also, too, we have a tag system. So let me see here. I clicked out, so I'm going to go to the preset here. We don't have a ton of tags. This is something I'm going to work in a secondary update. But for example, you could see, oh, here's some basses. I want to see just the bass sounds, and I want to just increment, through the bass sounds here. Or I'll look at just my favorites. So you can kind of add tags to your patches as you see fit. Eventually, the idea is we will have pre-made patches that will go out with the final version, so people don't have to add a bunch of tags, at least to the well-known patches out there. But if you got your own, you can open this edit tag right here, and right here, pop snare, that's going to be a drum sound, or percussion. So I'm going to add the percussion tag here and take it off. It's not my favorite. So, and then I can edit and go out, and now we've got a percussion tag set there. I also put in a custom tag here. If you're in edit tag mode, you can actually click on custom and then edit the name of that tag if you've got one that you want to do. All right, so we'll close that out. Okay, so of the settings up here, like I said, we've got the MIDI settings, we've got the librarian settings here. If you've got your own sysx or bank files, this is kind of how you would bring those into the editor. So the editor internally uses its own file systems. It kind of mentions that over here on the side. We've got file types for programs, for mixes, for banks, and then for the environment. And we'll talk about those in a moment. But basically, these native file types for this editor add in the sysx file, but also kind of enwrap it with other metadata, such as you can have, you'll see in a moment, like you can have some of these sidebar tools associated with the specific program. So if you wanted to share that with somebody else, if you share it as a program file, it automatically brings up all the other tools and anything else associated with it into somebody else's editor. But you can have a program or a bank. You can export that out as sysx if you want to send it to somebody who does not have the editor. Right now, we're not doing the mix stuff yet, so I've grayed this out. The environment, we've also grayed out. I'll explain that in a moment, but this will allow you to load up everything, including the program settings, or specifically if there are certain tools or configurations on the sidebars that you want to send to somebody else, you can do that as well through the environment file types, which will be added later. Mainly for now, though, you typically import sysx. It'll ask you if this sysx or sysx is a bank or a program, and if it's a bank, you can save it as a bank file, or you could save it as 128 program files, depending on how you want to save it. And then you can load a bank or a program up, and that once it's loaded, it will transfer it over to the A6. And again, the bank one can take a few minutes. The program is probably about 10 seconds. And you can set your storage here where you want it to save on your computer if you want it somewhere other than the default area. One of the things I want to add eventually in the final version is a patch generation tool. And right now I've only got it set up for bass sounds. But, and there's basically a safe to experimental slider. You could tell it whether you want it to have digital or analog distortion effects on it, or you want it to be mono and poly. If you don't put anything, it could be any of them. But if you want like just analog distortion that's polyphonic, you can just turn those on. If you hit the button, it will basically transmit every single parameter to your A6. It won't store it as a file. It will basically just change your working memory. So you can, hit the button a few times until you get a sound that you like, and then store that on your A6, and then send that over and save that as a program. This is very, very rough. I just kind of put one thing in here right now just to kind of give people an idea of what's going to happen with this. This is, consider this very beta right now. With program settings, you can set your default locations of what you want to open. And then here you can basically adjust your look and feel of the application. So obviously we got the classic blue as a default, but if you're lucky enough to have one of the red Andromedas, you can kind of get it to match there. And if you're one of the people that have one of those black layovers, you can actually go and add a black version as well. You can even go down and, I've kind of added an LCD screen effect here, but if you don't like that, you can just keep it flat and easy. Same thing with the LED colors. The font, I typically start with this A6 font to make it kind of look like that, but you can go to a computer font if you don't like that, if it's not easy to read for you. The A6 original, because I did get a question about this from somebody, if you actually look at the font on the A6, the numbers actually are a little bit taller. They're actually one line taller than some of the letters. So it's usually fine, but it can kind of get a little funky when you've got letters and numbers all put together. So to kind of fix that, I created this normalized font, which is what I typically like to use, and that keeps everything the same height. You can also change the LCD color and the drop-down color. Kind of, if you got one of those upgraded blue screens, you can kind of get that to match. And you can, I set options, you can go full black and white if you really wanted to. And same thing here, you could change those colors. So hopefully, your setup will kind of mirror whatever your Andromeda looks like in the real world. So that's pretty much here on top. Now the final section are these sidebar tools. So I've got 2 sidebar tools, top and the bottom. You can switch which one you want by selecting on the top here. For example, here's a note program. So if you want to, make a note here on the program, you can have notes on the specific program, on the bank, and on the environment itself, which is like the whole program. But anything you write, it will basically be automatically saved, and it will be saved with the file type. This is one of the things that, if you save the file type instead of the sysx file, this will be saved with it, so it will load up at another person's editor later on. The macro tool is a tool that basically allows you to put knobs on different screens together. So say if you're working on the oscillators, but you want to have the filters here, you can go to assign mode, click a macro, click a filter here, and then I want to click the second macro to get the second filter here. Okay, I'm going to go leave assign mode. Now I've got these 2 macros set up for here. I'm going to go over to the oscillators page, and now while I'm playing around here, I've got access to these 2 frequency knobs here that I can also play around with. So you have up to 8 macros you can put here. And I think that should be covered. If for some reason you want 2 screens of macros, let me know. But right now I've got it set up so you can only do 1 of each. So that's the macros. We'll go up to the monitor next. This is a typical MIDI monitor. Nothing crazy about this one. I don't think I have my MIDI turned on. So okay, yeah, I don't have my MIDI turned on at the moment. But if you got MIDI going in and out, it will kind of explain what's going on here. So you can clear this out. You can copy the log. If you're not really needing to use this for any reason, like a diagnostic reason, I would not use this tool because it does eat up and drain some resources trying to keep up with every event and spit it out. So we also have these parameter details tool. This is, again, if you're looking for like a certain specific detail on the type of a parameter, you can kind of get that here. This will tell you all that. Up here, you have the parameter help window. It will, again, a big part of why I wanted to do this was to just understand the Andromeda better. So I think this kind of helped put this together. So I've got, some descriptions, some tips, and then if you expand, you got more info on what the specific parameter you're looking at does. All right. MIDI control, self-explanatory. You basically, the easiest way I do it, you could set it up manually through here. It does do CC, NRPN, and RPN. But what I would do is just go to this learn function. Oh, I got to make sure I've got a... There we go. Open selected input. Okay, let's see here. All right, now it's learning. Let me see. Okay, it might be hard to see here, but I've got a little, launch station here. Now I've got it assigned to here. And now learn that, so I can click on this other one, click learn. I got another CC here, and this is kind of an easy way to quickly assign parameters to your MIDI controls. If this is, again, a very basic setup. If you got specific MIDI implementations that you're wanting to do, just let me know, and I'll see if I can do to work it in. And finally, the thing I want to talk about is this Morph knob, which is kind of the thing I was most excited to play around with. So this is inspired. I have a Black Corporation Deckard's Dream, and there's a software editor for that called JF Sebastian. And one of the cool features of that is that you're able to actually take 2 different patches and blend between the 2 patches, which I thought would be cool for the Andromeda, but then working with it, I realized the Andromeda can't handle, there's so many parameters, it can't handle all the data that quickly. So there's just no way to handle a ton of parameters like that, like the hundreds of parameters needed. So what I did is I made this scaled down version, which can do up to 4 parameters at once, which so far seems to work. Let me know if you have any issues with this, but right now this seems to work for me. If I go to assign mode, I could select a slot. There's 4 slots here for 4 parameters. Okay, I want to do this slot, and I want to do this semitone here. Okay, and I've got that semitone. I want to select this slot. I want to put this semitone. Okay, this one, let's say I want to do, I don't know, this width right here, square wave width, and this other one, I'll put the other square wave width. Okay, so I'm out of assign mode, and now what's cool is I can take one knob and it will do everything at once. And even better, if I want to flip something, I could flip something. I can flip these two, and now they go in opposite directions. And what I like that's even better on this is that if you have, for example, say, going up and down 60 semitones isn't that great. Maybe there's only, say 12 semitones, an octave up and down you want to do. You could actually go here, double click on it, and go 12, and this, maybe this second one, you want to go just 5 for a perfect fifth up and down. It's the only range you want. And now you've limited the range of this morph knob back and forth. So you can do a lot of cool things with this. I think I'm really excited to kind of play around with this some more. Here, if you just want randomness, you can hit shuffle and it will randomly change the values here. Not sure if this is a great feature, but it's at least something to play around with. Same thing in assign mode. You can hit random and it will just randomly assign 4 different slots to something. Again, just hoping to people play around with this and find something interesting. But yeah, that's the morph knob. And what's cool is the morph knob can also be controlled by MIDI. This is also something that can be controlled. So you can go to learn, and then, yeah, now I've got my MIDI controller that's controlling this morph knob. So you can have one hardware knob and twist and do a bunch of different stuff at once, which is really cool. All right, so I think that's everything. Lastly, you probably already know this if you've been working with editors, but there's some settings here you have to do on your Andromeda to make sure this will work here. Make sure it's receive mode on, that it's willing to receive sysx or sysx, that it's, it's user bank or this location. Transmit is typically, you want local MIDI, so it's transmitting to both. And I typically have a transmit thin just to make sure everything works well, but feel free to let me know if you want to change that setting or if you're having issues with different settings. I'm curious to hear what people deal with that. So anyway, thank you for checking this out. Thank you for sitting through this explanation. I hope you have some fun with this. Let me know if there's any issues. The next version of this that I'll be releasing, I want to at least get the mix settings figured out and start working on getting a universal patch tagging system going on. So let me know if you have any feedback, and I look forward to seeing what some of you can do with it. Thanks.